So as I mentioned, we will be recording this session and we'll share the recordings via the NAIA website and our various social media outlets as well. Quick information about the National Association of Enabling Educators of Australia. It represents the enabling and pathway educators in Australia. Our website is enablingeducators.org. We have a conference coming up between the 5th and 6th of December, so please mark the date for that as well. It will be hosted by University of South Australia in Adelaide, and the topic for the conference is reimagining enabling in higher education. The conference website, as far as I know, is not released yet, but keep an eye out on our website. If you've got a mobile phone, you can scan the QR code there. It'll take you to our website and you can sort of bookmark it. And that way you can sort of make sure that you are in the loop when the conference information is released. A little bit about Amita, today's speaker. Amita is an educational designer in the Division of Learning and Teaching at Charles Sturt University. She is passionate about student engagement and innovation in learning and teaching and applies continuous improvement principles to all her roles. As a lecturer, her focus has been on enhancing student engagement in her classes by implementing active learning pedagogies to assist her students to improve the analytical, critical, and problem-solving skills, along with developing employability skills. As an educational designer, she is assisting academics to design and develop new courses and revise existing ones to enhance student engagement outcomes. She recently received an Excellence Award for her innovations on introducing a new assessment approach at Charles Sturt University and leading a community of practice on interactive orals. Amita is also the co-chair of an upcoming international education conference called International Ed 2022. That's the website. I'll share the website in the chat a little bit later on if you're interested in that. Interactive orals and alternative assessment approach. And on that note, I'll hand over to Amita.
Thanks, Pranit. Thanks for that introduction. Let me first share my slides. Can everyone see my slides?
Yep.
I am working off one screen, so I may have to move this a little bit here and there. Okay, all right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to share this lovely initiative that we have been running at Charles Sturt University. A new assessment approach called interactive orals has been a wonderful alternative assessment approach for us for the last 18 months. And I would like to acknowledge Daniel Logan Fleming, who's joining us, who has been our mentor in this journey from Griffith University. So thanks, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. A little bit of background here. So we were looking for alternative assessment approach during the pandemic, pretty much like everybody else at that point in time. But that was not the only trigger. There were other issues with the existing assessments that we were using, sometimes to do with assessing the learning outcomes effectively, and definitely issues around academic integrity, which has been a big problem in higher education. At that time, I came across interactive oral assessments at a conference where Daniel and her team from Griffith University were presenting their work in this space and in developing this model. And they had been working on this for quite a few years by then. So it was wonderful to see that they had a lot of evidence and they had a lot of work done in this space. I could connect with this assessment approach straight away based on my teaching background. And I could visualize that it would have worked or complemented the other assessment in some of my management subjects really well and taken it to that extra higher level. So I encouraged our sub-dean academic development to introduce this approach at Charles Sturt, and with her support we established a community of practice to implement interactive orals, and Daniel has been our mentor ever since. And like I said, we've been doing this for 18 months and we have collected staff and student feedback of their experiences of interactive orals. So what is an interactive oral? An interactive oral is a genuine and unscripted conversation between an academic and a student framed around an authentic workplace scenario. Now, the scenario is the key point of differentiation between an interactive oral and any other type of oral assessment like a viva voce. If there is no scenario, or if either the academic or the student fall out of those scenario roles, then it becomes, turns into a well-managed viva voce. So the scenario is really crucial, and we'll talk about it along the way. This also assessment approach offers opportunities to synthesize and extend students' learning beyond limitations of other written assessments and learning materials. It's a face-to-face conversation, whether online or in person, so it ensures high level of academic integrity. And in that discussion, academics are assured of their students' knowledge and skills. It also is proven to enhance student engagement and outcomes, and it is definitely not a viva voce. This is a very versatile assessment approach, and it can be implemented as a formative or a summative assessment. It can be implemented as an individual or group assessment. It can be implemented synchronously or asynchronously. It's easy to design and manage. It is scalable to large cohorts. So the largest cohort that we have implemented it for is about 150 to 170 students, but our counterparts in Griffith have implemented it to 1,000 plus cohort size. So it is definitely scalable, because that's always a big question on our mind. It can be scaffolded within a subject or across a whole qualification. So this is the model that has been developed by the Griffith team on how to embed interactive orals in a subject. So to achieve the key objectives of enhanced student engagement and employability skills, as well as academic integrity, it is crucial to have 6 key characteristics in the design process. And those characteristics are scaffolding and support. So when we redesign an assessment, change it from an written or other type of assessment to interactive oral, we don't just change one assessment. We actually redesign all the assessments that to scaffold towards and from an interactive oral, depending on where it is located in the assessment regime. We develop support resources for staff and students, and I'll be talking about it a bit later in this presentation. So that's very important part of the journey, because we all know that we have tried, heard of, been inspired and tried new things, but without that support, we tend to, come across a point where we cannot progress. So that's a very important step. The second thing is it has to be scenario based, like I mentioned before. Without the scenario, it won't be an interactive oral. It should be aligned to a program as well as the subject or module learning outcomes. It should be accessible and equitable, should not disadvantage any student cohorts, and it should be professionally focused. So when we do the design process, we ensure that all these 6 characteristics are built in, and then we are assured that we will get the outcomes of enhanced student engagement outcomes, improved employability skills, and academic integrity. So I'm going to talk about the steps in the development process, but there is a little bit of precursor to this. Most of the time, the academics are either, experiencing challenges due to academic integrity or are unhappy with their existing assessment. So they're looking for alternatives. That's when they approach us. And most of the times, the academics do have a clear idea which assessment they would like to change. So they approach us into the community of practice or work with me one-on-one with their subject and what their expectations are, what they would like to achieve. And the first step in designing the task for interactive oral, the key focus is on developing the scenario. And I will be showing some scenarios as we go along. Once we have clarity on the scenario, the next step to complete the assessment task is developing the rubrics or marking criteria. So that completes one design of the interactive oral. Then we look at revising the assessment regime in the subject, which could be a completely new assessment regime or just a retweaked one. Once that's done, then as we start the journey, we develop resources for staff and students. So let's have a look at it. So the first step, like I said, is developing the scenarios. There is a QR code here. If you scan it, it will take you to a Padlet poll. So I'll just stay on it for a few seconds more. That Padlet wall has got, the different scenarios that we have embedded in our subjects, and they are categorized as per discipline. So you will be able to relate, and you can see it can be implemented in any type of subject at any level as well, except for PhD. So basically, if people want to scan it, and then I'll go to the Padlet wall and I'll talk to it. Let me just share again. Hopefully people are on this page. Can I just see if people have been able to successfully get to the Padlet wall? Okay. Okay, so thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, so there is under business and management discipline, there's this one scenario that we implemented where student would develop a business plan as part of the subject and other assessments. And then part of the interactive oral is that they would be pitching it to a potential investor or investors or a bank manager. So it's a realistic scenario that students could connect with when they were working on that business plan. And they were very enthusiastic about pitching this business plan to potential investors. Another one is, the second one there is on languages or in Bachelor of Theology. This is a biblical Hebrew subject. Now, some of these ones I will also talk about a little bit more as part of the vineyards as we go along. So just you'll remember the scenarios. So in the biblical Hebrew subject, there was a scenario about facing the translation committee where students had completed a translation of their chosen passage from the Bible, and then facing the translation committee for, to respond to their assumptions, choices of their translation. So that was another realistic scenario. Another one in the engineering workplace subject was about job interview. I'll be talking about this one particularly in detail. Another one in health and nutrition was about case handover notes between a senior colleague and a junior colleague. A vet science one with doing clinical rounds with the senior doctors. Client meeting, and as this last one was in criminal justice between a member of parliament and a subject matter expert, that's a student, giving them advice on developing initiatives for the area. So these are the initiatives, scenarios that I will be talking about a little bit further. So let me reshare my slides. Sorry about that, it's just how it goes. Okay, so that's step one, scenario. So we take the time to see, the level of the subject, where it is, what are the learning outcomes, and which professions will students will be going into. Sometimes it's not just one, that could be multiple. So we have to factor that in when we are planning the scenarios. Okay, the next step, really crucial, is developing the rubric. Now, this is a rubric that was developed by one of our vet science academics, and it offers a good starting point to anyone who is doing their interactive oral for the first time, and then they can develop their own. So this rubric is divided into three parts, as you can see, which focus on professional communication, theoretical knowledge, and extended application. So the professional communication is subdivided in three parts, where they're looking for correct terminology appropriate to the discipline, presentation in professional manner, because the scenario setting was as such that they had to be professionally presented, and then the confidence and certainty with which they could communicate, basically. So that was about the professional communication. Then theoretical knowledge was subdivided into two, as the knowledge and application of topic concepts as relevant to the discussion, and describing the concepts really clearly. And the third one is the extended application. So in the discussion, it's not, the aim is to not reassess students on, say, the written component that they have done, but, extend them and bring those, what if type of scenarios to challenge, where students have the get the opportunity to think on their feet and think of whatever they have studied and apply those concepts in solving the problems or issues raised by the academic during the discussion, and come up with solutions. So that's part, that the first part, and also if their solution is challenged, are they able to defend it? So that's just an added level of assessing how confident students are with their analysis. So this is a rubric that we have used. The aim is to not disadvantage students based on their English language skills. So it works really well with students with English as second or third language. And the focus is on truly assessing the learning of the students and not penalizing them if they go a little bit off track, or they're a little bit lost. This academic use conversational prompts to bring them back on track, and that works really well. And the other important part of the rubric is also a well-developed rubric makes marking much faster as compared to other types of assessment in case of an interactive oral. So simplified and well-created rubric helps academics to mark the interactive oral within 5 minutes, which is much faster as compared to any other written assessment. It takes a couple of goes sometimes to get the rubric right, but the rubric is crucial and it plays another role in helping prepare students for their interactive oral. And I'll talk about it a little bit further down the line. So the next step is redesigning the assessments in the subject. Now I've chosen the engineering subject that I mentioned before with the job interview. So it's a performance planning and review subject. And the added complexity is it's a workplace learning subject. So students are really dispersed geographically and are working in different types of roles in a variety of organizations. The other important part of this subject is that after students finish this subject, they have a choice whether either graduate and join the workforce, or they decide to continue with their studies and do their master's. So it's part of the integrated bachelor and master's for engineering at Charleston. So looking at where this subject was and some of the challenges the academic was experiencing in this subject, we decided to use a job interview as the scenario, which I just mentioned before. And in doing so, we thought it would help students, first of all, focus on their future self and, manage their professional development to get ready for that dream job, basically. And they were expected to complete a selection criteria like a proper job application and appear for interactive oral. Now, when we decided that, we also wanted to personalize this assessment because that's really important. So there is, no room for contract cheating. So we worked backwards and then thought, if job interview is going to be their final assessment as an interactive oral, let's not tell them what those criteria should be. Let students choose their dream job. They can go to Seek or any other platform, identify the type of role they would like to get into after finishing their bachelor's of engineering, use the selection criteria to do a skill gap assessment of themselves and see what competencies they need to develop to, qualify for that dream job they would like. And that skill gap assessment became their learning agreement at the start, and it's a year-long subject. So it was really important to give them that flexibility. As part of assessment too, then they would keep track of their professional development against those goals and also engage with peers because they were in workplaces and they were a bit disconnected from the university and their peers. So this was a good opportunity for them to share their experiences and support their peers in improving their skills and, learning from their peers as well. As part of the third assessment, it was, a performance development progress review as an interim review with the academic mentor as well as an industry mentor. So it gave students the opportunity to, relook at their goals, refine it, tweak it, or add something new if need be as part of the third assessment. And then in the fourth assessment, they completed the selection criteria that they had chosen. It was not given to them. They submitted that ahead of time and then appeared for the job interview. Now, these interactive orals have just recently been finished, and the academic got very positive response from the students, and some of them have responded to the academics saying that they have used that portfolio to apply for their real jobs. So it's a really positive outcome. So the scaffolding of the assessment really helped to personalize and allow students to take that ownership of their learning and steering their own career path, as well as develop those lifelong learning skills as well. So this was a really good example. Then once we have designed all that, what we do is we start developing resources. So the first one we do, and this for students especially, is we develop a sample recording with the academic. So what we do is we choose a different scenario, not the one that students are going to be assessed against. And the academic plays the part of the student, and one of their peer, or I'm sometimes the support person who plays the role of the academic. And we do this recording, and it is the first thing that we show students to make them aware what an interactive oral is, and what to expect. And we take it from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly run this one sample recording that we developed for one criminal justice subject. And that's was about gender and crime. So just give me a sec. Oh, I think I have to share my screen again, sorry, so that I can get the sound.
Yep.
Okay, just, can everybody see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so a bit of this background, and I do mention that in the video as well. So I am playing the role of the member of parliament, the academic who plays the part of the student who is supposed to be the subject matter expert, who has come to have a chat with me and is going to help me understand the issues so that we can develop some initiatives to address crime in the area. Okay, so that's, yeah, hi John. Really, thanks for taking the time and accepting my invitation to come and chat with me today. As you know, I'm the member of parliament for Port Macquarie, and we are looking at reviewing the policy matters around violent crimes. And we asked around, and the Department of Social Justice recommended you as the expert. So that's why we reached out, as you must have seen in my letter. So thanks for coming in. And yeah, I have a few questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. You know, in my organisation, we really value the opportunity to be able to come and talk to anyone about the sort of things that we do and the work that we do. So it's really great that you're open to us coming to talk to you about this. It's really fantastic.
Excellent, that's great. So my team is starting to investigate all these violent crimes in New South Wales. But as the subject matter expert, I just wanted to know, can you tell me a little bit about the latest figures on violent crimes and give me some context around its links to gender?
To gender. Yeah, gender is something that, we often see when we're talking about crime in general. I think there's this, in my interactions with the public, and certainly, in my role, I see all the time that, people tend to think that men are much more likely to commit crimes. And I think, from what I've seen in practice, I think that certainly bears out, and the statistics tend to tell us that as well.
So what are the numbers if we look at the statistics?
The statistics, well, it depends what crime you want to look at. So in my practice, we look at violent crime a lot, which is of course why I'm here talking to you today. And when we look at violent crimes, especially things like family and domestic violence and other types of violent crimes like assaults and sexual assaults, we find that men are much more likely to be the perpetrators or the offenders in those sorts of crimes, regardless of who the victim might be. And that's something that we find, pretty consistently in the statistics as well.
So if you look at the average number of crimes, what percentages would represent violence perpetrated by men?
Yeah, the figures, if we're looking at specific types of crime, especially something like domestic or family violence, we find that, I think off the top of my head, it's something like 70 or 80% of those types of crimes where we find men as the offenders. But I do know, I do know that it's not the same for every type of crime. But I think
So
we see.
when we talk about this general, like domestic violence is a big issue,
Mhm.
but we are talking about just violent crimes.
Yeah.
Are victims mainly women?
Yes, the victims are, well, the victims are a little bit more mixed. So, you know, while we know the statistics, the men are certainly the offenders, you know, that doesn't really vary too much across who the victims might be. So, you know, we have to remember that we're talking about family violence. So it could be children, and of course, they may be, you know, boys or girls, and of course, other men as victims of domestic violence. It's one of those statistics that people, you know, we see it in.
Let me just stop sharing that and come back to my slides. Okay, so, all right, I hope you can see my screen again. Good. Okay, so that was just to show you, it's a completely different discipline and different type of subject, but just to show you what it looks like. When we do this recording, the aim is to not make it perfect. So, you know, that's why we steered away from calling it exemplar. And the idea is that if it's like it has flaws, it's not near perfect, so that students can relate with it. And the next thing that we do once they have seen this one is we get students to mark the academic using the rubric that has been developed for that assessment. And it's really interesting to see that the students are much tougher with us than we are with them when we are marking. So doing that exercise is a really big part, and we plan, you know, to make sure we incorporate some errors in that and just see if students can pick that up. So this is really important resource that we develop for each and every subject, that this type of resource that is implementing interactive oral. The other thing we have also done is that our academic skills team have developed a workshop for students on how to prepare for their interactive oral. So they help them, you know, understand how to manage their nerves, whether it's to do with posture, you know, eye contact. So that's also a really useful resource that helps students prepare for their interactive oral. We also help them how to book, because the onus is on the students. They are responsible for booking the interview time or the discussion time for the interactive oral with the academic. The academics make time slots available for the week or 10 days whenever the interactive orals are scheduled, and they offer a variety of time slots, so morning, afternoon, and after hours, to suit, you know, students, you know, personal lives and other commitments as well. So then students know that they have to go and book in for their interactive oral. They get a confirmation, they can reschedule, you know, depending on what the situation is as well. And we also design other learning activities where, you know, during the online session, students can do some practice with other students using different scenarios. And it is a good exercise for them to prepare and understand how the discussion will flow as well. So these are the types of resources we develop for students. So we also develop resources for academics, and these are really crucial, especially for the first time academics who are developing, implementing the interactive orals in their subjects. So there's instructions for, you know, markers, if there are any, and students. So we embed those in subject side in giving all the outline of instructions to students, what needs to be done and when. But also for markers, if there are additional markers, then they need to know, you know, what the scenario is. There's some briefing for, you know, what the role of the marker will be, what the role of student will be, how to, you know, welcome them, help them settle, how to run the discussion. So there are detailed instructions that we develop as well. The next thing is that, well, we have been running this during from the pandemic. So we've only used the Zoom portal. So we set up a separate portal away from the subject side for running the interactive orals. And each and every interactive oral is recorded for marking, moderation, and appeals purposes. So, and the idea to keep it away from the subject side is that the recording doesn't become available to the students for, you know, obvious reasons. So setting up that portal and, you know, making sure that it all runs well. Then setting up a booking system. So we have used Calendly to help academics set up their booking time slots. It has the features of, allowing buffer time before and after. Academics allow some time for marking, also giving some informal feedback to the students at the end of their interactive oral. So, and once it's through a system, when students reschedule, there is no problem, there's cancellation, anything like that is managed in the system. And then there is less workload for academics in trying to make sure that everything is managed correctly. We also embed the rubric in the grade center for ease of marking. So what happens is that once the grade center is embedded, the academic has the chat with the students. And as soon as that's finished, they can go and mark in the grade center directly, make some comments. The total grade is calculated by the system, and the academic can finish off by making some overall comments. So that takes a lot of burden away from manually doing that. So it's quite fast and then can be saved for, for future purpose as well. We also support academics in developing conversational prompts for their IOs. For example, when there is a written component that precedes the interactive oral, what we do is we ask them to prepare a master spreadsheet in the background. And when they are marking the written component, there's always those standard issues that, what did you mean by that? And, oh, this is not clear, but what if, or you missed something. So they make notes about these things, and those things become the conversation starters at the start of the interactive oral. And in a way, for new academics, it helps to put them at ease before starting, just so that they also get a feel that it's not a question answer format, it's a discussion, and it's a genuine conversation between the student and the academic. So after talking about all this process, I'm going to share 4 subjects that have implemented the interactive oral and what were the outcomes. So this first subject is a nutrition subject in the Bachelor of Exercise and Sports Science. In this subject, students are required to, develop communication skills in order to provide general nutrition advice to clients within the nutrition scope of practice. And they had a written reflection assessment at the end of before the exam, towards the end of the subject, but that was not satisfactory in assessing student skills, because of course they have to have communication skills and, stick within their scope of practice. So it was very important to have that opportunity to assess student skills through an IO. There were issues around academic integrity because it was an online subject. Not all students attend the online sessions all the time. They don't necessarily switch on their camera. So this was a good opportunity to see the student. Of course, their identity is validated at the start of the interactive oral. So there was a concern for the academics. And they felt that it was a more authentic assessment approach for students to develop their employability skills for their future practice. So what we did was we designed a 10-minute interactive oral, where it was a professional chat between colleagues to do with giving advice to clients. A sample recording was provided to students to see what it was like. And like I said, they did the marking and all other practice activities. At the end of it, the academic found that it was definitely not a viva voce. It was a discussion where it allowed the academic, to explore the students' level of understanding of the concepts and how well they stayed within the nutrition scope of practice. So that worked really well, and the academic is really happy that it has now made the subject much better as a result of the interactive oral. This is the biblical Hebrew subject that I mentioned before in the scenario about the translation committee. Now, this is the 3rd subject in the Bachelor of Theology and includes a capstone assessment, at the end of their Hebrew learning journey. The academic was looking for effective ways of assessing Hebrew language knowledge and skills, because just written components were not sufficient. And because students go in a variety of professions after studying biblical Hebrew, so they wanted to make sure that students develop those valuable skills to prepare for those future professions. So the translation committee scenario was implemented in this subject. And the aim was to make sure that the students became confident Hebrew scholars ready for their future professions. The outcome was it gave the academic a clear indication of the students' capacity and their knowledge and their ability to apply their knowledge in different situations. The marking was much faster as compared to the written components. And interestingly enough, 2 students from this class have continued their journey with doing research project, which is very rare. They lose a lot of students, they don't always finish. So this was a very positive outcome as a result of the interactive oral. And this is the engineering subject where I showed you the complete redesign of the assessments. So this is a third year engineering subject, which is completely distance and online and is a workplace learning subject. It's a second of its kind in the qualification. The challenge for the academic here was the students were not taking ownership of their professional development. There was a lack of engagement because they're away from university campus. The issue in assessing students' competency development was the timing when they would have those opportunities to develop those skills in their workplace was different for everyone. So trying to keep that uniform was going to be challenging. And also the scaffolding and personalization of assessment, just to make it more interesting and value add for students, was missing. So this was done via 10-minute job interview scenario. Again, a sample recording was provided to students. Now these assessments have just been finished and students are really happy. Like I mentioned before, they're now more involved and aware of their professional development and their ability to control and steer their own career path. Personalized reflection on their professional development and increased peer engagement. So that has gone really well as well. And the last one is the Indigenous Communities and Policing subject in the Bachelor of Policing and Public Safety. So this cohort includes serving police officers and students who are studying to become police officers. And they, of course, have to assess cultural competency in this subject and professional practice. It's a capstone subject. Previously, it was only done through written reflection, but it was not sufficient because their reflective skills and positionality was very challenging to assess as part of the written assessment. These students in their profession are expected to develop relations with the indigenous communities in their local area, know who to go to. They work with the closing the gap targets. They have to learn to communicate in a culturally competent, sensitive way, and also be aware of intergenerational trauma. So there were a lot of complex issues here to be assessed, and it was challenging to be done through a written assessment. So we designed a 10-minute interactive oral scenario of job handover from serving a senior police officer to an incoming one, and they were sharing their knowledge, and was a good opportunity to have that dialogue and assess students' knowledge and skills. And this was really important because cultural competence for police is crucial as they are the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system. It's just to show you a variety of subjects that we have implemented interactive orals in. So what our students tell us about their experience of interactive orals? Overwhelmingly very positive response from students to have an alternative to written assessment. So to be able to showcase their knowledge verbally was really appreciated by the students. They found the scenario was quite realistic, so they could connect with it. It made them think on their feet and develop applicable skill set towards real life situations, not just in the workplace. It enhanced their oral presentation skills. They got practice of communicating and managing their time as well. It made them engage with their learning at a detailed level, which enhanced their learning. So basically upfront, when students know that's how they're going to be assessed in an interactive oral face-to-face with their lecturer, they obviously make an effort to study well and come prepared. And the students who are prepared do really well. And of course, if they have not prepared, it shows very quickly. Students also develop confidence in tackling assessments that are a little bit different, which was also very important. And they found it really beneficial to, deliver their learning in oral format because they could explain it more comprehensively. So again, students who are not good at writing, it's a really good opportunity for them to showcase their knowledge, and it allowed them to delve deeper into their work. So really positive feedback from the students. And what do our staff, say about their experience of interactive orals? So the first and most important thing for them was they were, so happy that they were assured of their students' knowledge and skills and their readiness to join their professions. That was crucial for them because many times when you mark the exams, you're really not 100% sure, or in written assessment, you're not sure whether it's the student's real work as well. So it enhanced academic integrity. But the other important feedback was that, we give a lot of feedback on written assessments to students, but there is never that guarantee that students have actually read it, understood it, and implemented it in improving their performance. In this situation, at the end of interactive oral, when the academic provided, informal feedback to the student, they felt that it was truly heard. And it also impacted on their teaching and learning once they changed the assessment, and it made it much more focused as well. So that was very valuable for them. And of course, marking was much faster. So we had many happy academics, especially end of the year. As soon as the interactive oral was done, the marking was done, it was finished. So they were very pleased about that as well. So in conclusion, thus far we have implemented this approach in 20-25 subjects, and they're at level 1, 2, 3 of undergraduate degree. There are a couple of master's subjects in the process of implementing interactive orals, and we are also trying to get some of our pathway subjects, because I think this would be a very good approach for pathway students to, develop their knowledge skills, boost their confidence, and, get that opportunity to express their knowledge in a non-written format as well. It has definitely improved academic integrity. It was a great option during the pandemic, but has now become another standard approach to assessment at our university that, the academics can choose from. It helped to establish connection between staff and students, which was valuable during the pandemic, but even in general, it's really important when students are learning online and not necessarily always connected with the university. And the final thing that I would like to say is that it has established a dynamic community of practice around interactive orals. It's multidisciplinary. It's allowed to break those silos of disciplines and faculties, and the cross connections have been wonderful in learning from each other. So we are carrying on with that, and even academics who have finished their subjects to keep coming back and support the new academics in developing and administering their interactive orals. So it's been a really wonderful experience. So thanks for that, and we can take some questions. And if you'd like to know more, you can always contact me, but here is a QR code that you can scan. It will take you to a resource that Griffith University team have put together, and includes a lot of resources that you can use and learn from, and feel free to reach out if you need any help. So thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Amita. That really was wonderful, actually. And I mean, I've got a number of questions that I've got sort of that I need probably will ask you a little bit later on, but I'll open it up to everyone else if you want to ask any questions. And I see Jane Roberts is first off the mark. She's got a hand up. So Jane, you are able to unmute yourself now and ask Amita.
Hi, Jen.
Are you there, Jen? You should be able to unmute yourself. Let me. There we go. Yep. Hi, Jen. Looks like Jen is having some problems with your microphone. If you like, you can type the question in the chat, please, Jen. Or you can come back to it a little bit later on. Does anybody else have any questions in the meantime? While there's a question, how do you, Paul Wormel, how do you cope with large cohorts where you may need to moderate between different markers? Amita, any questions, any comments about that?
Yeah, so look, what we do is I have developed a complete module for markers to help them train with that. So we do spend time in bringing the markers on board and understanding that the students are divided and they understand, because, and the rubric plays a key role in ensuring that consistency of marking and have a good understanding. So there is a bit of prep between the main subject coordinator and the team of markers to get that clarity of what's expected and how to go about that process. And it works well.
Anybody else has any? How did you go, Jen? Were you able to get your microphone working? Not yet. It sounds like it. Anybody else has any questions at the moment?
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention in the presentation was a 10-minute well-managed interactive oral is equivalent to a 4,000-word written essay or report assessment. So you can see the difference in marking makes a big difference.
I did have a question around that, so you've clarified that as well. Thank you very much for that. I think Bronwyn has got a question up,
yeah,
hand up.
Thank you. It's a great presentation. Thanks so much. And but I wondered if you get at the beginning you did say that you don't see this as a viva voce, and I wondered if you could just clarify the distinction between the oral viva and the interactive oral again for me, please.
Yeah, so the main difference is that in a viva, it's a question answer format. There is no preparation or scaffolding towards that with other assessments. And the main difference with the interactive oral is that because it's around a scenario, it's a discussion. So there is the stress level is quite different for students. And we have checked that because whenever you mention, and you know, when I was promoting this assessment approach in the university, many academics, just that word oral in that interactive oral, they would say, oh, no, we don't want to go there because, you know, students get stressed, we get very bad feedback, we don't want to go there. So we make an effort to explain that difference is that it's not a question answer format and they're not just thrown in a, you know, deep end, like it's not an exam in that you don't know what will be asked or whatever. When it is around a scenario, there is a good opportunity for students to prepare themselves. The other thing is also, for example, that business plan scenario, we do not expect students to memorize everything. It's not like an exam. They can take their documents with them. Sometimes they prepare slides depending on what the situation is. They can look into their document. They can look at some figures, whatever they need to check. And that helps settle students. Once they know they don't have to memorize everything, it is a professional discussion and you are allowed to look into your paperwork when there is a discussion. That seems to make a big difference to the stress levels of students. And because we also scaffold the other assessments and, help them develop towards that interactive oral, they're a lot more prepared for it and they know what to expect. They have done a lot of practice runs as well. And that makes a big difference in stress levels as well as the outcomes for students in the interactive oral as compared to a viva voce.
Thank you. Could I also then ask one more question about the the recording process? And I think that we use Zoom to record these, but that it actually increases the work for academics because they have to save the recording. But you said you set up a separate portal for this. So
we are using Blackboard, and I've set an organization site in Blackboard as for a Zoom portal. And the thing is that it's like setting up a recurring meeting. It is set up for automatic recording. And so basically the academics either pause or stop the recording after each student, and it is saved as a distinct file automatically. The academics don't have to do anything. They just have to set up the meeting and everything happens in the system. They don't have to do that. The only thing that I recommend them, if they want to, they can go in the back end and rename to match the student, but they can see the students in the recording, including their ID. So it works really well. It is, and it's a good way to go back for moderation or if there is appeal as well. So they don't have to save it, saved in the cloud, and it's done automatically.
Excellent. Just before we move on to somebody, let me try if Jen is still there.
I might stop sharing so I can see people a bit better.
It doesn't look like it. Look, Amita, Paul has got a question in the chat. Do the scenarios provide enough flexibility to address situations in which students coach each other about the scenario? We had to do this in some other kinds of oral assessments. And if I could add a question around that as well, how much effort and time does it take to actually develop those scenarios?
The first time, yes, it takes a little bit of time. You know, the whole journey that I explained the first time round, it's a bit of work, but then when it gets, it simplifies the marking. But the second time around, it becomes much faster because the first time the academics are learning the whole process themselves. So, and what we do is we brainstorm, and sometimes, you know, we develop multiple designs for them to choose from. So they have to feel comfortable because they are the one who are going to run with it and be facing the students. Now, we don't necessarily provide the scenario to the students upfront. That can be the surprise element. Also, some like the one that I showed you with gender and crime, there were 6 scenarios that were developed. So students had the opportunity to prepare. But the way the conversation steers is also depends on how the student responds. So there is not a standard format, and the academic can come up with different types of what if scenarios for different students. So it's we have spent a bit of time with that, and Daniel's also responding to that in the chat box as well. She's a lot more experienced in this than I am, but the idea is that we bring those you know, new elements in that are not that easily transferable from one student to the other. So it is many academics prefer to not give the scenario, and they'll just give it a little bit ahead of time or give multiple scenarios, and then students don't know which one will be picked up. Or it can be linked to their previous assessment, which is their personal one anyway. And so the scenario is around that. So even though it might be a fixed scenario, but students' previous assessment would be different, each one. That's why the conversation goes in different directions. I hope that helps.
I think it does. I'm not sure Paul might be able to. Any other questions from anybody else?
And please feel free, if you think of something else later, to reach out. I'm more than happy to help you. I think, Bronwyn, you asked about the Zoom. If you have more questions, I'm more than happy to, you know, have a chat with you, and I'll show you how we set it up. If that helps, more than welcome.
I've got a question, Amita, around equity for students. For example, quite often, particularly during COVID, when we did this whole online exams and things like that, we were always mindful of some students who might not necessarily have good quality internet connections, video, what do you call it, camera, sound equipment and things like that, etc. But also the environment where they are often are required to join in may not necessarily be very conducive to present themselves for an assessment and a high stake assessment kind of thing. What's your experience with those types of?
Look, very fortunately for us, not many students had major issues. Well, they required access to internet anyway to be able to access their what do you call learning resources and everything. Of course, the condition for the interactive oral was that they had to have a camera and switch it on because we had to validate the student identity. But there were not many challenges, and also you know, students were welcome to reach out to their academic ahead of time to express if there were any issues. The main thing that we expressed with some experience with a couple of students were that, you know, they were quite stressed thinking about it, and the academics took extra time to help them settle, let them get comfortable, and, you know, talk about other things. So they planned their timing accordingly so that, you know, there was room to do that. So the first time around, we asked the academics to book, you know, longer time slots just so that there was that time that if students were stressed or there any other issue, they could help calm them down, settle, and it worked actually. But definitely that was a condition that they had to have access to a laptop, you know, with good internet connection and webcam. Without that, and if they had issues with that, then we would have to think about alternatives. But fortunately, we haven't experienced that this far.
Excellent. Yeah, Paul, I think, has a follow-on comment or question. Paul, did you want to unmute yourself and sort of voice it out? It's a little bit confusing. Sorry to put
no,
you
very
on
happy
there, Paul.
to do that. Yeah, the context is we have groups of students who work together to set up a laboratory quality management system in accordance with the international standard. They then have an external NATA assessor come in, but we give them an exit interview. And they tend to coach each other about some of the standard questions that we ask. And that's actually fine, because it means they actually, that they all get the knowledge and understanding on some content. But because they each play a different role in their group, we can then question them about that and test what they did and their understanding of why they did it. So yeah, there's some consistency in the sort of responses you get, but then you can probe in quite individual ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And the other thing too, Paul, in situations, some of the subjects, we have also looked at doing the group assessments where the academic is not involved, they're only the observer, and the students have a chat amongst them. So for example, in the biblical Hebrew one, they were given a scenario where they were on a dig in Israel, came across pieces of pottery that had some, Hebrew script on it. They had to work together to put that together, read it, and then translate it. And so basically, they can be, it's a very versatile and rich way of doing things where you don't, I've just given you a very simple approach to the basic approach to interactive oral, but there are so many permutations and combinations, and you can look at various assessment designs, and that works really well, and they get really enthusiastic about it. And the academic has said to us that, oh my God, that could have been there, the final interactive oral instead of me having to do this one-on-one, because it worked really well. So yeah, it depends on the context. And of course, it has to be supported in the learning outcomes for them to do a group one, but the group ones work really well as well. And we're doing a few more group ones as well.
I'm just mindful of the fact that we are about to run out of time. But look, if you do have time, I understand that some people might need to run off to other meetings. But if you do have time, please hang around. There's probably a couple of more questions and comments coming up before we wrap it up. So as I said, we've got all the recordings. If you do need to run off, we'll be sharing it through the NAIA website and through our socials as well. But if you hang around another couple of minutes, we'll probably be able to address some other questions and comments that are coming in as well. I think Jen has just rejoined. So Jen will give you an opportunity to ask your question, given you had your hand up early on. If you're able to do that, Jen, please. Are you there, Jen? I'm not sure. I've got a question that I'd like see if you can address that, please, Amita. One of the things that we often come across, particularly for large cohorts, is we have a team of markers who often mark whether it's exams or essays or reports, etc. And it often takes a little bit of time to make sure that their marking is calibrated and moderated, and that their marking of the same standards, etc. What's your experience with those types of exercise when you have multiple people running those interactive orals? I mean, how much time and effort do you need to sort of put into sort of, for want of a better word, train your markers, multiple markers to mark a single interactive oral?
So, like I said before, the biggest one that we have done is up to 170. And there were only the one additional marker to the subject coordinator. And what I have done is that to make it easier for the subject coordinator, because they also are, hard pressed for time, this is a complete module that the markers can complete, first of all, to make themselves familiar. It includes videos and all kinds of resources in there. Then we get them to also look at the sample recording that the academic has developed with me or another academic, and mark it against that rubric. And that exercise, just as much as for students, is good for the additional markers as well, because once they can compare notes with the subject coordinator, or the multiple markers can do that exercise at the same time and then compare how they're marking, have a discussion about it. And that helps to actually get them on the same platform. And again, can't reiterate enough, a good rubric is really crucial. So we spend a lot of time, and I can tell you the first time I did work with the academic who's running the biblical Hebrew subject, we came up with this fantastic task. But when we started writing the rubric, we all fell in the trap of that traditional rubric, and it was very hard. It was a mind-bending exercise to step back from that. So what are we looking for? So I think it takes a little bit of time early on, but then it becomes easier. But having that separate module with all the resources and doing that exercise of marking the sample recording is crucial to get them on that, same platform and make it better from there. So
excellent. Thank you very much for that. Can we have probably one or two last questions or comments before we wrap it up, please? Okay, look, I think it's probably time to wrap it up. Look, thank you very much for sharing that, Amita. And I must also thank Danielle, who seemed to have been managing the chat, which I wasn't actually aware of. Thank you very much for both of you for doing that and sort of sharing your experiences with interactive orals. I personally am very, very excited about the whole idea of running interactive orals. For a whole range of reasons. I mean, it's very obviously an authentic form of assessments, etc. But it seems like, from your experience, it's quite scalable as well, which I'm excited about. One of the things that I really enjoyed, Amita, from your presentation was the time that you people have spent actually to allow your students to engage with the rubric. For them to actually mark other samples, etc. And I quite like that idea. Quite often in assessments in higher education, for example, we almost hide our rubric away from students, and therefore students don't get to engage with that in meaningful ways. So that that was quite encouraging as well. But thank you again. Thanks very much for that. As I mentioned earlier on, we have recorded this and we will share that via the NAIA website. So please keep an eye on that as well, including our socials as well. So thanks again. And on that point, I'll